Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 essential double piano concertos for beginners. Do beginners need double piano concertos at all? Well, I don't know. You never know what you're going to like, so I am assuming that if you're a beginner, you might want to hear at least a few of these, and you'll probably enjoy them very, very much, especially the more modern ones, actually. Well, I don't know. I shouldn't say that because the first thing on the list is Bach, J.S. Bach. Now, Bach was the guy who invented the keyboard concerto. It became a piano concerto. In Bach's day, it wasn't so much. It could have been, could have used one, but he didn't. Usually he wrote for harpsichord. Sometimes it was a clavichord. Sometimes it was an organ. It was a keyboard. And so these were called keyboard concerti because the instrument in question was sort of up in the air. But we know that Bach wrote these pieces to be performed at his own concerts at what's his name's coffee house, and Zimmerman's coffee house. That was its name, wasn't it? And as a result of that, he and his family and his kids got together and they would perform. Most of these concerti were written for other instruments and adapted for the keyboard, at least as far as we know. And it happened actually in conjunction with his son, CPE Bach, who wrote his first keyboard concertos at the same time that Bach was writing his harpsichord concertos. So who did what is really not clear. It was a family project. Basically, like you and your dad making a little race car out of balsa wood and entering it into the, derby thing you had in school, or a science project. Well, these guys did keyboard concertos, and Bach wrote 3 concertos for 2 keyboards, BWV 1060 to 1062, and they are marvelous pieces. They really are, and they sound wonderful whether you play them on harpsichords or piano. If you do it on a harpsichord, you've got to have good-sounding harpsichords that aren't too clattery, or else it will probably drive you insane. On pianos, they sound, I think, certainly more mellow and just as lovely. So, yeah, and CPE Bach wrote only 1 concerto for 2 keyboards in F major, WQ 46, Votked 46. It's a terrific piece. He also wrote a fabulous, amazing concerto for harpsichord and piano. One of the only pieces ever to combine the 2 instruments, a real harpsichord and a real piano. I mean, it was a forte piano. It was an earlier version of the piano, of course, from the 1780s or thereabouts, but it's brilliant and wonderful. I couldn't put it on this list because I'm doing double piano concertos, and where you've got to have a harpsichord to do this CPE Bach other double keyboard concerto piece. But the 2 keyboard concerto, you can play on a piano or on a harpsichord if you have 2 of them. People had a lot more space in those days. You ever notice that? Because, you had to have in your music room, which is a dedicated room in your house, most likely, at least a grand piano, and usually more than one, or often more than one, so you could do 2 piano things, because orchestral works particularly were often arranged for 2 pianos. And so you played a lot of other music on 2 pianos. It wasn't just for 2 piano concertos or 2 piano sonatas. It was really for all-purpose music making. That's why 2 piano works exist in the first place. And Mozart wrote a delicious concerto for 2 pianos. It's his piano concerto number 7 that he would have played with his sister, Nannerl. The 2 of them were a circus act when they were children. Their father, schlepped them around Europe and auditioned them for all the nobility and wealthy people to see. And usually the wealthy people would fling money at them when they were done. They were a pair of trained monkeys, more or less. And and so Mozart wrote a delightful concerto for 2 pianos, which gets played pretty regularly. He also wrote one for 3 pianos, which is a whole nother story. Mendelssohn wrote 2 concertos for 2 pianos, one in A flat major, one in E major, and they are big, rich, juicy, succulent, busy, notey pieces. They're fun to listen to. Mendelssohn would also have played them with his sister Fanny, most likely, who was a very gifted musician. They're fun pieces. They were written for his domestic consumption to be played at home because he had a family that had lots of money, and they had their own private concert hall and theater, which they could produce his operas and concertos and orchestral things. They would hire an orchestra, and poof, it was an evening's entertainment instead of like, watching game shows or whatnot. Instead of The Price is Right, they had Mendelssohn's latest double piano concerto. They're definitely fun to listen to. You will enjoy them. Max Bruch also wrote a concerto for two pianos. Now, Bruch is a composer. He died like in the 1930s. I mean, it's amazing he lived that long. Everyone thought he'd been dead for decades before he actually died, largely because his style was extremely conservative. He was a mid-19th century German romantic composer. He's best known for his Violin Concerto No. 1, which is a brilliant masterpiece, a fabulous work that most people encounter fairly regularly on the violin circuit, the violin concerto circuit, and also for the Scottish Fantasy, which is equally marvelous for violin and orchestra. But his double piano concerto is charming. It's full of good tunes. It's very well written. He was a conservative, but he was a craftsman, and his music has a clarity to it, a lightness of touch, which is really very, very beautiful. And you hear it in this concerto. It's well worth getting to know. Then, of course, we have Poulenc. Now, Poulenc wrote the most popular modern concerto for two pianos. It is so much fun. Poulenc is just fun. He really is. It sounds like silent movie music at the beginning. There's Balinese, gamelan, exotic Asian music at the end of the first movement. The slow movement is Mozart, and Mozart that sort of becomes romantic, sentimental 1930s something film score or something. Who knows? And the finale is jazzy. Very jazzy. Oh, it's just great stuff. Absolutely wonderful, and you really ought to get to know it. If you don't, you'll just have such a good time listening to it. It's not a minute too long. It doesn't have an ounce of fat or flab on it, which is hard when you have two pianos. Two pianos opposed to a full orchestra. You've got a lot of potential to oppose blocks of very busy sonority. But Poulenc's is just effortless. It's just fantastic. Also, a fabulous double piano concerto, Martinu. Bohuslav Martinu, the Czech composer, he wrote a double piano concerto around the same time as his symphonies. That's around the 1940s, in his maturest style. It's a very busy work. It's got lots of notes. But, oh, what notes they are. Oh, it's so colorful and so much fun to listen to. Really a terrific piece. Very, very busy. It will keep you awake. No matter what, it'll keep you alert. He gives the players tons of stuff to do. And it's if you like that, you listen to his 6 symphonies, if you've heard any of those, you're going to love this double piano concerto. It's absolutely tremendous. Vaughan Williams wrote a concerto for 2 pianos. Actually, it's his concerto for 1 piano. But when it was first performed, his concerto for 1 piano was considered to be very busy and somewhat heavy in terms of its piano writing. And so it was believed at the time that it would become more popular if he arranged it for 2 pianos, because there just isn't that much great repertoire for 2 pianos. And it's a wonderful concerto. It ends quietly, of course, which is the kiss of death, but it is a wonderful concerto. And I used to love the 2 piano version more than the 1 piano version. Now I kind of like the 1 piano version more because it lets you hear more of the orchestra. But the 2 piano version is a lot of fun as well. And you can compare them and see which one you think is more effective. It's actually quite a bit of fun to do. Malcolm Arnold, his concerto for piano, duet, and string orchestra. Malcolm Arnold is such a great composer. I mean, he gets absolutely no attention aside from like his English dances and the tune he never wrote for the film The Bridge on the River Kwai, which is actually the Colonel Bogey March by Kenneth Alford. Malcolm Arnold wrote all the rest of the music. And the one thing he did not write is the thing that became famous. Of course, it always happens that way, doesn't it? He also wrote a concerto for piano 3 hands, which is quite the interesting thing. I mean, you have to have 3 hands. Not too many people have 3 hands. But the piano duet concerto is like all of his better music. It's got wonderful tunes, and terrific ideas and a real sense of humor. He always had a sense of humor, and he wrote very expertly for his forces. And last but not least, the Czech composer Jan Novák, who you probably have never heard of, and who he was sort of a follower of Martinu in that style of busy neoclassicism. He wrote a fabulous concerto for two pianos and orchestra. Actually, all of his concertos are really good. I mean, they're exciting and vibrant and rhythmic and tuneful, but also contemporary. And he's never writing down for anybody. There's no sense of drooling simplicity about his writing. It's approachable, good music. And I can't recommend it to you enough. So there you have it. 10 essential double concertos for beginners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, there's more than 10 because Mendelssohn wrote 2 of them and Bach wrote 3 of them. But what the heck? 10 composers who wrote double piano concertos. And if you're a beginner and you're just getting started, grab one and give it a listen and see what you think. It's a medium all to itself and a wonderful one for you to sample. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.